I'm starving for this. More. Please, more.
"I'm starving for this," the giant widow whispered, her hand trembling against the lonely cowboy's chest as golden sunset painted them both. Evangeline Thornwood, 6'2" of aching loneliness, had finally let herself touch him, really touch him, and now she couldn't stop. Dalton Mercer lay beneath her touch, this compact drifter who'd wandered onto her Montana ranch 3 months ago, and something in his eyes told her he was starving too. When he'd finally done it, when he'd looked up at her without fear, pulled her down to him and kissed her like she was delicate instead of giant, Evangeline had broken. More, she'd begged, please more. And he'd given it. Every tender touch, every whispered word, every moment of intimacy her late husband never offered. But what was it about this lonely cowboy that made the giant widow keep asking for more? What had he done that filled the hunger in her soul? And why couldn't either of them stop now that they'd started? 3 months earlier, Evangeline had been standing on that same porch, watching the dust rise from the road. Another drifter, another man looking for work. She'd stopped expecting anything different. The town called her the giant widow behind her back, sometimes to her face. At 6'2", she towered over most men, and after her husband Preston died 2 years ago, she'd learned to stand even taller. Had to. Running the Thornwood Ranch alone meant showing no weakness, asking for no help, needing nobody. But God, she was tired. Tired of eating dinner alone in a house built for a family, tired of waking up to silence, tired of working until her hands bled just so she wouldn't have to feel the emptiness pressing against her chest. The rider came closer, and Evangeline's breath caught. He was small, compact, maybe 5'8" with his boots on. Gray threaded through his dark beard, and his eyes, even from a distance, looked like they'd seen too much. He sat his horse like a man who'd been riding his whole life, easy and natural, but there was something broken in the way he held his shoulders. "Ma'am," he tipped his hat but didn't smile. "Heard in town you might need a hand." Evangeline studied him. Most men her height or shorter either made jokes or got angry, like her size was a personal insult. This one just looked at her. Really looked. Not at her height, not at the ranch behind her, at her eyes, at her face, like she was a person, not a problem. "You got references?" Her voice came out harder than she meant it to. "No, ma'am, just honest work and a strong back." He paused. "And I don't talk much, if that matters." Something in Evangeline's chest shifted. She should have sent him away, should have asked more questions. But loneliness makes you do strange things, and there was something about this quiet man that felt safe. "Bunkhouse is out back. Supper's at 6. Don't be late, don't expect conversation, and don't get comfortable. I run this ranch alone, and I intend to keep it that way." "Yes, ma'am." He rode toward the bunkhouse, and Evangeline watched him go, wondering why her hands were shaking. His name was Dalton Mercer, she learned later. 42 years old, widower. Lost his wife and unborn baby 5 years back, and hadn't stopped moving since. He worked like a man trying to outrun his own shadow, up before dawn, in the barn until after dark, never complaining, never asking for anything extra. Evangeline watched him from her kitchen window while she ate her solitary dinners. The way he gentled the horses, his hands moving with such careful precision. The way he fixed the fence line she'd been meaning to repair for months. The way he touched everything on her ranch like it mattered. 3 weeks passed. Evangeline started finding small things done that she hadn't asked for. The porch step that always creaked, fixed. The gate that always stuck, oiled. Fresh wood stacked by her door, even though she had a perfectly good woodpile by the barn. One evening, she brought coffee out to where Dalton was doctoring a mare's injured leg. The horse was wild-eyed and skittish, but Dalton's hands moved so gently, murmuring soft words that the animal slowly calmed. "She trusts you," Evangeline said, her voice rough from not using it all day. Dalton looked up, and the kindness in his face nearly knocked her over. "Just takes time, ma'am. Patience. Letting her know I ain't gonna hurt her, that I see she's scared, and that's okay." Evangeline's throat went tight. "My husband never doctored the animals himself, said it was beneath him, said a lot of things were beneath him." Dalton's hand stilled on the horse's leg. "Then he was a fool, ma'am. Because there ain't nothing beneath caring for something that depends on you. That's just being human." The simple honesty of it broke something loose in Evangeline's chest. She turned away before he could see her eyes filling. "Supper's ready. You should eat." "You eat yet, ma'am?" The question stopped her cold. Nobody had asked her that in 2 years. I'll eat later." Seems like you always eat later. Dalton stood, wiping his hands on his jeans. Maybe tonight you could eat now, with me, if that's all right. Evangeline should have said no, should have kept the distance between employer and employee, but she heard herself say, all right. They ate on the porch as the sun went down, not talking much, but the silence felt different than the silence she'd been living in. This silence had another person in it. This silence didn't press down on her chest like a weight. When Dalton stood to leave, he looked at her, really looked, and said, "Thank you for the meal, ma'am, and for the company. Been a long time since I sat with someone and felt peaceful." After he left, Evangeline sat alone in the dark and cried, not sad tears, something else, something that felt like a door opening in a house that had been locked up too long. She didn't know it yet, but she was starving. Starving for exactly this, for someone who saw her, for someone who made her feel less alone, for someone whose presence didn't demand she be smaller or quieter or less. She just didn't know how hungry she really was. Not yet. That would come later when the lonely cowboy finally did it, when he gave her what she'd been starving for all along. The next morning, Evangeline woke to a smell she hadn't experienced in years, coffee brewing and something cooking. She pulled on her robe and walked barefoot to her kitchen, then froze in the doorway. Dalton stood at her stove, flipping eggs in her cast-iron skillet like he belonged there. He'd never come into the main house before. Never crossed that invisible line between ranch hand and employer, but there he was, sleeves rolled up, moving around her kitchen with quiet confidence. "Mr. Mercer." "Dalton," he corrected gently, not turning around. "And before you get riled up, I figured if you're going to keep skipping meals, someone ought to make sure you eat proper. You've been taking care of this whole ranch by yourself. Seems like someone ought to take care of you for once." Evangeline stood frozen, something hot and painful rising in her chest. "You don't have to. I know I don't have to." Dalton plated the eggs and set them at her usual spot at the table. "But I want to. There's a difference." She should have been angry, should have sent him back to the bunkhouse, should have reminded him of boundaries. Instead, she sat down, and when Dalton sat across from her, not at the head of the table where Preston always sat, but across from her like they were equals, something in her started to crack open. The eggs tasted better than anything she'd made herself in months, maybe years, probably because they were seasoned with something she'd forgotten existed, someone caring whether she ate or not. "Tell me something true," Dalton said quietly, his coffee cup cradled in both hands. "Something you never told anyone." Evangeline's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. "Why would I do that?" "Because I asked. Because maybe you need someone who wants to know." His eyes were steady on hers. "Because I think you've been alone so long, you forgot what it feels like to be seen." The words hit her like a physical blow. Her hands started shaking. "I used to dance," she heard herself say, the words spilling out before she could stop them. "Before Preston, I loved to dance, but he said I looked foolish, that a woman my size shouldn't draw attention to herself. Said I looked like a giraffe trying to be graceful." She laughed, but it came out bitter and broken. "I haven't danced in 10 years. Dalton set down his coffee cup and stood. He walked around the table and offered her his hand. "Dance with me. There's no music. Don't need it." His hand stayed extended, steady and sure. Evangeline stared at that calloused hand, this man half a head shorter offering something her tall, appropriate husband never had. She took it, and Dalton pulled her up, his arms going around her waist. She had to bend slightly. He stood straighter, and they swayed together in her kitchen while morning light poured through the windows. "You ain't too tall," Dalton murmured, and she felt his words against her collarbone. "You're beautiful. You're strong. And any man who made you feel like you needed to be smaller was a coward who couldn't handle a real woman." Evangeline's breath shuddered out of her. "Why are you doing this? Why are you being so kind to me?" Dalton pulled back just enough to look up at her, and the raw honesty in his face made her knees weak. "Because 5 years ago, I lost everything that mattered, my wife, my baby, my whole future. And I spent every day since punishing myself, drifting from place to place, never letting anyone close enough to matter. Then I saw you standing on that porch, and something in me woke up." His voice dropped to almost a whisper. "You're starving, Evangeline. I can see it in your eyes, but I'm starving too. What if we stopped starving together?" Nobody had called her Evangeline in so long. Preston always called her the wife or just barked orders. The town called her Mrs. Thornwood or that giant widow, but hearing her name in Dalton's voice felt like coming home to a place she'd never been. I don't know how, she whispered. I don't know how to let someone in anymore. Preston, he made me feel like I was too much, too tall, too strong, too opinionated, like I needed to apologize for taking up space. Then he was a damn fool. Dalton's hands tightened on her waist. You don't take up too much space, Evangeline. You take up exactly the right amount, and I ain't scared of your strength. I ain't intimidated by your height. I ain't threatened by your independence. I'm just a man who sees a woman he wants to know, and who hopes maybe she wants to know him back. Evangeline bent down and kissed him, just like that. No planning it, no thinking it through. She just kissed this compact, kind man who made her feel delicate and powerful all at once. And when his arms pulled her closer, when his hand came up to cradle the back of her head like she was precious, she broke. Tears streamed down her face as she kissed him deeper, desperate, like she could drink in all the kindness and care she'd been missing for years. When they finally pulled apart, she was shaking. More, she whispered against his mouth. I want more of this, more of you, more of feeling like a woman instead of just a workhorse. Then that's what you'll get, Dalton promised, his thumb wiping away her tears. Every day, every morning, every moment I'm here, I'll give you more. What if the town talks? What if they laugh at us? The giant widow and the little cowboy. Dalton's jaw tightened. Let them talk. Let them laugh. I ain't afraid of small men with even smaller minds. You want more, Evangeline? I'll give you everything. Every sunrise with coffee already made. Every evening with someone who listens when you talk. Every night with someone who thinks you hung the damn moon and stars. Evangeline pulled him close, this man who barely reached her shoulder, but somehow made her feel safe and seen and beautiful. Stay, she breathed. Please stay. Don't drift away like everyone else. Nowhere else I'd rather be. And he kissed her again, soft and sure, sealing the promise. Outside, the ranch was waking up. Cattle lowing in the distance, birds singing their morning songs, the world turning like it always did. But inside that kitchen, something miraculous was happening. 2 starving people had found each other, and they were finally beginning to feed each other's hunger. But the world doesn't let people be happy without a fight, and the reckoning was coming faster than either of them knew. 2 months passed like a dream Evangeline was afraid to wake up from. 2 months of Dalton's coffee waiting for her every morning. 2 months of working side by side, his hand finding the small of her back when he passed. 2 months of evenings on the porch, her head on his shoulder, talking about everything and nothing. 2 months of kisses that left her breathless and touches that made her feel like the most beautiful woman alive. The ranch hands noticed. Of course they noticed, but the good ones, the ones Dalton had carefully hired to replace the lazy drifters Preston used to keep around, they smiled and said nothing. They saw how Evangeline laughed now, how she stood a little taller, a little freer, how the hard lines around her mouth had softened. But happiness makes noise. And in a small Montana town, noise travels fast. Evangeline was in the barn brushing down her mare when she heard the horses, multiple riders coming up the drive fast, purposeful. Her stomach dropped even before she saw who it was. Garrett Thornwood, Preston's younger brother, all swagger and entitlement and barely contained rage. He had 3 ranch hands with him and a thin man in a dark suit who had to be a lawyer. Dalton appeared at her side like he'd materialized from shadow. You know him? Preston's brother. He's always wanted this ranch. Evangeline's voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. He's here to make trouble. Then let's go meet trouble together. Dalton's hand found hers, squeezed once, and they walked out of the barn, shoulder to shoulder. Garrett dismounted and tied his horse to Evangeline's porch rail like he owned it. He'd always done that, even when Preston was alive, claimed what wasn't his. Evangeline, not Ava, never Eva. He'd never respected her enough for that. We need to talk about the future of this ranch. The ranch's future is just fine, Garrett. Evangeline kept her voice level. You can leave now. Garrett's eyes slid to Dalton, and his lip curled with disgust. So the rumors are true. The giant widow's taken up with some drifter half her size. You're making yourself a laughingstock, Evangeline, making Preston's memory a joke. Preston's memory? Evangeline's voice could have cut glass. Preston barely spoke to me except to criticize. He married me for this land, and we both knew it. Don't you dare talk to me about his memory like it was something sacred. Careful. Garrett's voice dropped, dangerous. You might own this ranch on paper, but you're one scandal away from everyone knowing you're unfit to run it. A judge might see things differently when I tell them about your situation, about how you've lost your mind, taking up with hired help. About how you're disgracing my brother's legacy with this inappropriate relationship? Dalton stepped forward. Despite being 6 inches shorter than Garrett, something about him seemed bigger, more solid. You threatening her? Garrett laughed, ugly and sharp. Who's this? The lady's little protector? You got any idea what you've gotten yourself into, boy? She's using you. She's lonely and desperate, and when she gets tired of you, she'll toss you aside like yesterday's trash. That's enough? Evangeline's voice rang out across the yard, and even Garrett flinched. Listen to me very carefully. This is my ranch. Preston left it to me. You have no claim, no say, and no right to come here making threats. Dalton isn't my hired help anymore. He's my partner. He works harder than any man I've ever employed. He treats me with more respect and kindness than your brother showed me in 10 years of marriage. And if you or anyone else in this town has a problem with that, they can take it up with my lawyer. Your lawyer? Garrett sneered. You mean old Henderson who can barely stay awake in court? You think he's going to stand up against real legal pressure? The lawyer in the dark suit stepped forward, holding papers. Mrs. Thornwood, we have witness statements from multiple townspeople attesting to your erratic behavior. Your relationship with this ranch hand, combined with several questionable business decisions. What questionable decisions? Evangeline's heart was pounding, but her voice stayed strong. Selling off the South pasture land, hiring new hands without proper references, spending ranch funds on personal... The South pasture was dry and useless, and I got triple what Preston paid for it. Every hand I hired came with references, which is more than Preston ever required, and every cent of ranch money has gone back into this ranch. Evangeline took a step forward, and the lawyer actually backed up. You want to try this in court? Fine. But you better have more than gossip and lies, because I keep perfect records. Garrett's face went red with rage. You're making a mistake, Evangeline. When this drifter leaves you, and he will leave you, you'll come crawling back begging for help, and I won't give it. I'll watch you lose everything, and then I'll buy this ranch for pennies when you can't make payments. He ain't leaving. Dalton's voice was quiet, but it carried like thunder. See? I spent 5 years running from the best thing I ever had, a home, a purpose, someone to love. I ain't making that mistake twice. Whatever you throw at us, we face together. You can threaten her. You can spread your lies. You can try to take this ranch through legal tricks. But you can't break what we got, because it's built on something your brother never understood. Actual love and respect. Love? Garrett spat the word like poison. You've known her 2 months. You think that's love? That's desperation? That's loneliness? That's enough. Evangeline's voice cracked like a whip. She moved to stand beside Dalton, her hand finding his. Their fingers intertwined, and she felt his strength flowing into her. You heard him. We face everything together. Now, get off my land before I have the... Sheriff, remove you for trespassing and harassment. Garrett's face twisted with fury. You'll regret this, both of you. This ranch will be mine, and you'll both be nothing but a sad story people tell in town about what happens when a woman gets too big for her britches and a drifter gets ideas above his station. He mounted his horse, jerked the reins hard enough to make the animal dance, and rode off with his men following. The dust cloud hung in the air like a threat. Evangeline stood watching until they disappeared, then her knees nearly gave out. Dalton caught her, held her up, his arms strong and sure around her waist. You meant that, she whispered. About staying? About facing everything together? Dalton turned her to face him, his hands cupping her face, tilting it down so he could look directly into her eyes. Evangeline Thornwood, I'd face hell itself if it meant waking up next to you every morning. You asked for more, remember? Well, I'm giving you more. I'm giving you forever. I'm giving you a partner who won't run when things get hard. I'm giving you everything I got. She kissed him there on the porch where anyone could see, where the ranch hands were watching and probably cheering, where the whole world could witness that the giant widow and the lonely cowboy had found something worth fighting for. Marry me, she said against his mouth. Dalton pulled back, eyes wide. What? Marry me. Let's give them something real to talk about. Let's make this official. Let's show Garrett and everyone else that we're not ashamed, that we're not hiding, that what we have is real and strong and forever. She was crying now, happy tears mixing with fear. Unless you don't want... Yes. Dalton was crying too, smiling through tears. Yes. 1,000 times, yes. I'll marry you tomorrow if you want. Tomorrow, then. They held each other as the sun climbed higher, two people who'd been starving finding feast in each other's arms. The battle wasn't over. Garrett would come back with more threats, more legal pressure, more attempts to destroy what they'd built. But they'd face it together. And that made all the difference. Spring came to the Thornwood Ranch like a promise kept. 3 months married, and Evangeline still wasn't used to waking up next to someone who loved her. Someone who thought her height was beautiful. Someone who kissed her forehead every morning and whispered, "Good morning, Mrs. Mercer." Like her new name was sacred. The legal battle with Garrett had been brutal. He'd filed challenges to her ownership, claiming Preston had promised him the ranch. He'd spread rumors through town that got so vicious that some shopkeepers wouldn't serve her anymore. He'd even tried to get the bank to call in her loans early, claiming she was mentally unstable. But Evangeline had her perfect records. She had testimonies from every ranch hand about her competence and Garrett's harassment. And she had Dalton standing beside her in every court appearance, his hand in hers, his presence reminding her she wasn't alone anymore. The judge had thrown out Garrett's case 2 weeks ago, told him to stop wasting the court's time with family squabbles and spite. Garrett had left the courthouse making threats, but they were hollow now, empty. Everyone could see the truth. The Thornwood Ranch was thriving under Evangeline's leadership, and her marriage to Dalton wasn't scandal. It was love. Now, Evangeline stood in her garden, the one Dalton had insisted she plant because you deserve beautiful things, not just functional ones. Watching her husband work with the new colts. He'd been right about staying, right about everything. "Mrs. Mercer," called out Josiah, one of their best hands, "where you want these new fence posts?" Mrs. Mercer, she smiled every time someone said it. "Ask Mr. Mercer," she called back, loving how natural the title sounded on Dalton now. That evening, she found him on their porch, not hers anymore, theirs, whittling something from wood. She'd learned he did this when he was thinking deep thoughts. "What's on your mind, husband?" She settled beside him, and he immediately shifted to pull her close, his arm around her waist like it belonged there, like she belonged there. "Just thinking about how wrong I was," he said softly, his hands still working the wood. "About what?" "About punishing myself, about thinking I didn't deserve a second chance." He held up what he'd been carving, a small wooden figure of a woman and man dancing, the woman bent slightly, the man on his toes, their foreheads touching. "I thought losing my first wife meant I should never love again, that I should just drift until I died. But you taught me different." Evangeline took the carving, her throat tight with emotion. The detail was incredible. You could see the love in how the tiny figures held each other. "You taught me something too. You taught me that being strong doesn't mean being alone, that asking for more, for love, for tenderness, for someone to truly see me, isn't weakness. It's the bravest thing I ever did." Dalton turned to face her fully, his hands cupping her face like she was made of something precious. "Evangeline Mercer, you're the strongest woman I've ever known, not because you run this ranch, though you do that better than any man could. Not because you stood up to Garrett and the whole town's judgment, though you did that with more courage than most people got. But because you were brave enough to admit you were starving and let someone feed you. That takes real strength." "And when I asked for more," Evangeline whispered, remembering that first kiss, that first morning, that first moment of connection, "you kept giving. Always will." He kissed her, and it still felt new, still felt like coming home and going on an adventure all at once. "You want to know something?" "Always. I'm still starving every single day." His eyes were intense on hers. "Starving for one more smile from you, one more morning waking up next to you, one more evening watching the sunset with your hand in mine. I'm starving for 50 more years of this, Evangeline, starving for forever with you, and I don't think I'll ever get my fill." Evangeline laughed through tears, happy tears, the kind she never thought she'd cry. "Then I reckon we'll starve together. Keep asking for more, keep giving more, keep feeding each other's hunger for love and connection and partnership." "Deal." He sealed it with a kiss that made her forget everything except this moment, this man, this life they were building together. They sat as the sun set over the Montana plains, this tall woman and her compact man wrapped in each other's arms. The ranch hands finished their work and headed to the bunkhouse, calling out good nights. Somewhere in town, people were probably still gossiping about the giant widow and her inappropriate choice. But up on that hill, in the house that wasn't lonely anymore, Evangeline and Dalton Mercer were too busy being happy to care. A horse whinnied in the barn. The wind whispered through the grass. The sky turned gold and pink and purple, painting them both in colors that looked like hope. "I love you," Evangeline whispered. She said it every day now, making up for all the years Preston never said it back. I love you too. Dalton's arms tightened around her. My beautiful, strong, perfect wife. She'd been starving for this, starving for love that didn't ask her to be smaller, starving for tenderness that wasn't conditional, starving for a partner who saw her height as beautiful instead of intimidating, starving for someone who stood beside her, not because she needed saving, but because partnership made them both stronger. When the lonely cowboy had finally done it, when he'd looked at her with love instead of fear, touched her with gentleness instead of intimidation, chosen her despite what everyone said, he'd given her what she'd been starving for all along. And she'd kept asking for more. More mornings together, more quiet conversations, more gentle touches, more moments of being seen and loved and cherished. And he'd kept giving, every single day, every single moment, more love than she knew what to do with, more partnership than she'd ever dreamed possible, more happiness than she thought she deserved. The stars came out one by one, filling the Montana sky with light. And underneath that vast expanse, two people who'd been starving had finally found their feast, not in food or money or status, but in each other, in love that was patient and kind and strong enough to weather any storm. They'd face tomorrow together, face whatever Garrett tried next, face the town's whispers and the world's judgment, but they'd face it as partners, as husband and wife, as two people who'd been lonely and broken and had found wholeness in each other's arms. The giant widow wasn't giant anymore. She was just Evangeline, just a woman loved by a good man. And the lonely cowboy wasn't lonely anymore. He was just Dalton, just a man who'd finally found home. Together, they were everything, and that was more than enough. Where are you watching this from? Drop your location in the comments below. And if this story touched your heart, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another powerful story like this one. We post new emotional journeys every week, and trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. See you in the next story, and remember, it's never too late to stop starving and start living.